Right, today we're going to study SD 46.6. That is on page 85. The Sankita Desita Dhamma Sutta. Right, the word Desita means that which has been taught, or that which is taught. Sankita Desita Dhamma Sutta, the discourse on the Dhamma taught in brief. The Burmese title is simply Sankita Desita Sutta, the discourse on the briefly taught. A 8.63, and this is about the disciples' training in brief. Here, training means from the beginning, observing the precepts, to awakening itself. The sutta begins with this monk who comes to the Buddha and asks the Buddha for a teaching in brief. Right? So once a monk asks for teaching in brief, basically he's asking for meditation instructions so that he can practice it during his solitary retreat. In other words, he already knows Dhamma theory. In a sense, the Dhamma theory has two purposes. One is to clear our minds of old views, old tendencies. And number two is to have a good idea, a good command of what the Buddha has taught, so that this can help us in our practice to attain at least stream winning in this life itself. So to be a Buddhist means you should at least break through this in this life, break through into the path, attain the path as a stream winner, so that we're not reborn into one of the lower planes, subhuman planes, where you are caught for a really long time. So, and there's no way that you can learn any Dhamma in the animal world, the Asura world, the Preta world, the hell beings world, and so on. Even among humans, you need this conducive environment that conduces to Dhamma training, Dhamma practice. And even in the heavens, it's a nice long holiday that you don't have these right conditions for Dhamma practice. The irony is, if there is any conditions that conduces to Dhamma training, it will be in the sense world, among the sense world devas, and even then the devas got to make extra effort. It's like, getting people out from Club Med or one of those nice holiday resorts to learn the Dhamma. Of course, nowadays they like doing that. They go to a beautiful place for retreats. But it is because we go there single-mindedly. We go to that kind of place for retreat. But if you get crashed into a bunch of holiday makers and you tell them, hey, I'm going to teach you Dhamma, I don't think they're likely to listen. The crowd will be you have different kinds of people, there'll be lots of distractions and so on. So the human world is the place where you have choices, you have experience of pleasure and pain, goodness and bad, and you're able to learn, you're able to decide, you're able to train your mind and free it. So for that reason, being born as a human, you're able to renounce the world, so to speak. To renounce the world doesn't mean you break up all relationship with everyone. If you're a son, you're still a son. If you're a daughter, you're still a daughter. What you give up is worldliness. You give up being caught up with what you see, hear, smell, taste, and touch, so that you're able to access your mind directly, completely. The mind is able to see itself. The mind doesn't look at itself through the eye, through the ear, through the nose, through the tongue, through the body, or through some external way of looking. The mind looks at itself, examines itself directly, so to speak. I mean, it's like you have 6 friends, They are called eye, ear, nose, tongue, body, mind, right? So you ask their opinions about you. You'll never get the real idea. You got to decide what is it you have to do with yourself. So mental training is like that. You see yourself completely as you are. And then wisdom arises. That means you have lived this holy life, you have understood yourself. And then you come back as this awakened person. Then eye, ear, nose, tongue, body, mind become your servants. You use them to teach others, to engage others, to reach out to others. So that's the kind of, in summary, how mental training happens among the early monks. Okay, let's look at this sutta. It starts on page 88. Sankita Desita Dhamma Sutta, the discourse on the Dhamma taught in brief. A8.63, originating in Savatthi. Now a certain monk approached the Blessed One, saluted him, and then sat down at one side. Sitting thus at one side, the monk said to the Blessed One, "It would be good, Bhante, if the Blessed One were to teach the Dhamma in brief. Having heard the Dhamma from the Blessed One, I would dwell alone, aloof, diligent, exerting, and resolute." The last phrase, alone, aloof, okay, that means this monk is going for a solitary retreat. Diligent, exertive, resolute is going to go into this meditation to attain at least 3 meaning, but in this case it is usually arahathood. Okay, so this is what the monk formally requests. Many monks do this. This is one of those few occasions when the Buddha did not really acquiesce. He did not say, okay, very good. Another occasion is when Malunkyaputta approached the Buddha. The Buddha practically teased him. In the case of Malunkyaputta, like Vacchagotta, was an intellectual. He asked lots of these questions about the 10 points and so on. And he probably was a monk for many years, for decades maybe. So finally, when he was old enough, he went to see the Buddha, and the Buddha said, "Are you sure you're ready? I mean, what will the young monks say of you, But Malunkyaputta was serious. Here we're not told who this monk is, we're just told a certain monk. Okay? So it can mean any monk, basically. It can be anyone. It can be even any of us, not necessarily a monk, right? So we want to train ourselves. So here, what did the Buddha say? He says, "It is just in this way that some hollow persons beseech me, but when the Dhamma has been taught, the Dhamma has been spoken, they think they should still follow me around." All right? So now the Buddha wants to make sure that this monk is serious. He says, there are people who come for instructions, and then they listen to it, and they still follow me around. So here we see the Buddha is not a guru. He doesn't want followers. He says, once you know the Dhamma, you practice it. You don't need to follow me anymore. You learn the Dhamma. Okay? So we see here a very important statement by the Buddha, just a simple line. In a sense, the Buddha also wants to make sure, right, this monk is serious, and this monk is indeed serious, because his reply, in section 1.5, he says, "May the Blessed One, Bhante, teach me the Dhamma in brief. May the Welcome One, Sugata, teach me the Dhamma in brief." So he insists. So he said, second time, third time. "Perhaps I would know the meaning of the Dhamma, I would know the meaning of the Blessed One's word, perhaps I would be an heir to the Blessed One's word." Heir to the Dhamma. Okay? So in other words, he would realize the true teaching. So he shows his sincerity, his perseverance. Then the Buddha accepts his answer. The Buddha says, in that case, Bhikshu, you should train yourself thus. My mind will indeed remain well settled internally. No bad, unwholesome states that have a reason will remain overwhelming my mind. Thus we will train ourselves. So it's quite a simple instruction. Basically the Buddha is saying, don't let any unwholesome thoughts invade your mind. Well, in a sense, this instruction is incomplete, but we know where the Buddha is heading. He's telling them, okay, you go into your meditation, clear your minds away, and if this happens according to what the Buddha has said here, this monk would attain jhana. And what's interesting is the short teaching is not just this 2 lines here, 2 sentences. It is actually the rest of the sutta. So it's not really short actually. Here you have like 5 pages, right? Of course, if you just read this, or if this is a script and the Buddha were to speak, it'd be hardly 5 to 8 minutes. In that sense, it is short. But when we look at the intensity and the depth of this teaching, it covers the whole stretch of early Buddhist meditation, especially the 4 jhanas. But here the Buddha adds something else. He adds the 4 divine abodes, Brahmaviharas. What's interesting here is the Buddha didn't actually start straight away with meditation for this monk, the traditional so-called vipassana meditation, if you like. The Buddha actually begins with the 4 divine abodes. So this monk probably was a Brahmin before. He was probably a God believer before. So this kind of teaching will help him to wean away all those God idea and so on. Even today you find many of the top upper class Buddhist leaders, those titled Buddhist leaders who see themselves as entitled and so on, they often carry this baggage of their old religions, and they often, in a subtle way, in a rather hidden way, still believe in the God idea. And occasionally we do see them stating all these things in some of their pujas and writings. And as long as it doesn't intrude in their public teachings, it's all right. But if it does, then their command of the Dhamma would be questionable. So this is where training the Dhamma is really important, to know the suttas, to keep the precepts, to practice, and then to understand what the Buddha actually taught, to see through these words. What is the Buddha talking about? Of course, scholars know today, although we say that the Pali Suttas are the early Buddhist texts, they're the earliest records we have of the Buddha's teachings, they are not 100% perfect as a set of records. Because of human error, not because of the Buddha's teaching, because we forget, when we chant, we forget certain lines and so on. Sometimes certain things get left out and so on. But there are ways that careful scholars can detect what's missing and how to put it back. So those specialist scholars, they also compare the Pali texts with some of those remnants of Sanskrit, what they call scriptures, the first 2 volumes of the Chinese Tripitaka. So when you triangulate with all this, you get a better idea of what is early Buddhism. So it is useful, even vital for us, to distinguish between early Buddhism and Theravada. They are not the same. But in a sense, what we are reading here in Pali is the Theravada text. But what we understand if we follow the suttas as they are without the commentaries or without the commentaries modifying the teachings of the Pali, and you get this peace of mind and this joy and this wisdom, then you call that early Buddhism. So early Buddhism is not really the text. They are the experience that this text provide. It is the text that's not perfect, but early Buddhism is by definition complete. They're like what technically we call the Ur text, if you like. All right. So when you compare this text with the Siddhi Agamas and the Sanskrit version, Tibetan version translations of all these early texts, then you say, okay, this is what is probably the original statement made by the Buddha is clearer then that is called early Buddhism. So early Buddhism is not any of those schools. It is how we understand the Buddha's teaching. It becomes a part of our life and it changes our life, and people can see that and they are inspired by that, and they don't follow us. They see in us the Dharma, the teaching, and that is what they follow. Otherwise, you get cult Buddhism, and there is a lot of cult Buddhism today. You have populist monks who have crowds of people, and they are kind of attracting millions in money and wealth and property and estate and so on. And their devotees, a high percentage of devotees actually have blind faith, because to them these monks can do no wrong, and that is very troubling. In other words, they follow the monk, they follow the teacher instead of the teaching. Then you have a very serious problem there. And that's when they will take a stand and say everyone else is wrong and only this monk is right. That is why the Buddha again and again reminds us, follow the teaching, not the teacher. Even the Buddha himself did that. For example, in the Gaurava Sutta. So this practice is very important. Following the teaching rather than the teacher. Okay, so the Buddha starts his instructions. The first part, he tells this monk how to attain jhana through the 4 divine abodes. Look at section 3. And this is the first abode, cultivation of loving kindness. When, bhikshu, your mind remains internally well settled, so that no bad wholesome states that have arisen will remain overwhelming your mind, then, bhikshu, you should train yourself thus. So this is the language of the Tripitaka. What the Buddha is saying in simple language is, clear your minds of all intruding thoughts, pacify your mind, clarify it, and then you direct yourself to loving kindness. 3.2. Through the cultivation of loving kindness, the liberation of mind will be cultivated, grown, made a vehicle, made a basis, practiced, consolidated, well engaged. Notice the words cultivated, grown, made a vehicle, made a basis. So this loving kindness is a basis for wisdom. So in other words, this meditator uses loving kindness to calm and clear his mind, to attain the very wonderful level of peace and joy, and then he comes out of it and directs his mind to the teachings of impermanence, suffering, not self. Okay? But he goes on building up this jhanic mind, this wonderful, peaceful mind. It's not like you attain once and then you do it like that. You got to go on doing it again and again to make sure this mind is really stable, it is habitually stable, peaceful, joyful, clear. So that is, it becomes a basis for wisdom. Thus, bhikshu, you should train yourself. Section 4. When you bhikshus have cultivated and grown this samadhi thus, then you, bhikshu, should cultivate this samadhi with initial application, with sustained application. Of course, once you see these two words, initial application, sustained application, refers to the first two dhyana factors of the first dhyana. It should cultivate this samadhi without initial application and sustained application. Right, so here we see a very interesting arrangement. The Buddha is listing the jhanas differently now. He's listing them almost like in a horizontal way. Samadhi with initial application and sustained application refers to the first jhana. You should cultivate this samadhi without initial application, without sustained application. Refers to the second jhana. So, from first jhana, you go on to second jhana. And then, in the next pair, you should cultivate this samadhi without initial application, without sustained application. You should cultivate the samadhi with zest. Okay, so here, zest is, in other words, zest is left. Okay, so this refers to the second jhana. There's no more initial application, sustained application. Vitaka vichara is gone or are gone. And then next, you should cultivate this samadhi zest-free. So clear away the zest, this kind of rather exuberant joy, if you like. Okay, you should cultivate this samadhi attended by comfort or sukha. You can use happiness if you like, because sukha has different translations. There's a note 32 there. Here the word is sata. Sata, which in fact the word sukha also can mean comfort. So this is very interesting. So this probably shows a quite early teaching here, because the Buddha did not use the technical term sukha. It says comfort, sata. But of course, when you think in terms of the actual state, we are talking about sukha. This is the third jhana. You should cultivate this samadhi attended by equanimity. This is quite obvious. This one is the fourth jhana. Okay? So here again, we're reminded, you cannot get technical with the early suttas. The Buddha is talking his teachings. He is stating in very simple language, but it's very clear what you have to do. It doesn't mean you must be technical. Because in meditation, you can't be technical. You're dealing with people's feelings. When you do scholarly work, yes, you need to be technical. And yet, in meditation training, you still use exact language. But exact insofar as you are able to purify the emotion. You can't get technical when you're trying to heal someone of their pain, because you don't know what's going to happen. So you follow step by step, and you interact, you are proactive, you respond in context, you respond according to the situation. So you can't get technical in that sense, because the Buddha is dealing with direct training of the disciple. Okay, so we have this first part. As you know, once you see this first part, the cultivation of loving kindness, then the other three are also cultivated in the same way. So here you've got to imagine this is one cycle. So this monk cultivates loving kindness. First he clears his mind of all thoughts. Then he goes into loving kindness. He attains first, second, third, fourth jhana. Okay, and then he masters jhana in terms of loving kindness. And then next he does the same for compassion. You look at section 5. When you bhikshus have cultivated grown this samadhi thus, then bhikshu, you should train yourself. Thus, through the cultivation of compassion, the liberation of mind will be cultivated, grown, and made a vehicle, a basis, practice, consolidated, well engaged. Thus, bhikshu, you should train yourself. And then after that, section 6, same thing. You go through the 4 jhanas with compassion. Okay? And the same thing with gladness, same thing with equanimity. Right? So here we see the 4 Brahmaviharas taught by the Buddha to attain all the 4 jhanas. So this is where you have the sutta teaching. All right. Here again, when you compare the sutta teachings with the commentaries, you do see some differences sometimes, and sometimes the differences are quite glaring, quite significant. Now, if there are differences, then of course you should give priority to the sutta teaching, not to the commentary, because the commentarial views are later views, their cultural views, and so on. So this is something to bear in mind. Okay, right. So those are the 4 jhanas. I don't have to go through in detail with the others, like including equanimity, because if you are going to practice yourself, then you look through these teachings and follow them, kind of stage by stage. All right. So imagine now, okay, this monk has finished practicing the 4 Brahmaviharas. He's able to master loving kindness, compassion, gladness, and equanimity. So he is this wonderfully happy person, full of loving kindness. But what we are not usually told here is, psychologically, what is the significance of this practice? The significance is that he has given up the God idea. The 4 Brahmaviharas is the antidote to the theist dogma. Those who are caught up with the God idea, who have difficulty letting go of the God idea because it gives us a sense of security, power, etc., then you cultivate loving kindness. How does this loving kindness, how do the 4 Brahmaviharas help us to overcome the God idea? By cultivating godliness within us. God idea, the theistic God idea is that God is out there. He's a powerful figure. He's out there. You got to go to Him. But the Buddha said, no, there's no such thing. You can't, what is this God you're talking about? Okay? And different cultures have different versions of their God. Some are very fierce, some are not so fierce, and most of them are lascivious, like the Greek gods. They're basically like the humans. Imagine they've got all the powers, what they want to do with other people. It is quite frightening. Okay? Whereas what the Buddha is doing here is telling us, you cultivate godliness inside you. And what is the first quality of this supreme, capital G, God? He is all love. Right? You talk about God is love. Well, this is, the Buddha himself said this 2,500 years ago. It's not just love. He is all compassion, ruth. He is all joy, gladness. He is all equanimity, right? So in other words, this idea of godliness, when you practice it, is that you begin where the people are. You accept them as they are, warts and all. unconditional acceptance of the people, of the world, of all beings, of all existence. Then you show them compassion, all compassionate. And you're always there ready to guide them, help them. You don't create the world and then leave it to mess itself up. These are all stories. But here, as a practitioner, we try, we work to be compassionate because it also trains us. And then you rejoice, you show gladness, you rejoice in the goodness of others. When you see good in the world, good is possible. But even then, the way the world is, you have the eight winds, you have all these opposites happening. People are uncertain in their ways. Many become good, but still there are others who remain behind. So you remain calm, you don't show your wrath and destroy the world, bring a flood or whatever it is like that. So you show equanimity to the world. Right? So these are the four true qualities of a high God. But we cultivate this within ourselves, these qualities of godliness within ourselves. So we don't need this powerful, parental, godly, theistic idea of an external being who doesn't really exist. But you cultivate these qualities inside you, then you don't need that kind of idea, because the kind of idea is false, it has this idea of a self. Then you don't have to worry about whether he exists or not and so on, because you experience all those qualities inside you. A being is his qualities, not his members, not his arms, legs, body and so on. It is those good qualities that he has. So this is why the four Brahmaviharas are so important in early Buddhism, because the Brahmins believe in this God idea. So this is taught to them to help them overcome this hindrance as a bridge to go over into the Buddha's teaching. And that true teaching is the four focuses of mindfulness. So this is the last part of the sutta. This is what the monk should be really doing. So he uses the four Brahmaviharas to attain this wonderful state of joy and peace of jhana. Then he comes out of the jhana. Then he goes on to do body-based meditation. Okay, so that's the first kind of satipatthana. It's called kaya-nupassana, body watching or contemplation of the body, right? And then number two is watching feelings, feeling-based meditation. And the third one is thought-based or mind-based meditation. And the fourth, the last one, is dharma-based, or if you like, reality-based meditation. Let's look at this last section, the four focuses of mindfulness, section 11. The first satipatthana. When bhikshu, this samadhi has been cultivated. Notice this samadhi, this is referring to the previous one, the jhana, has been cultivated, well cultivated by you, then you should train yourself thus. Notice, cultivate A first and then B, right? So once you have cultivated this loving kindness, compassion, gladness and equanimity, then you go on to practice satipatthana. I will dwell exertive, clearly aware, mindful, observing body in the body. And then if you go to the Satipatthana Sutta, you find there's a whole range of practices you can choose. The most famous being breath meditation. And what do you do with breath, for example? The next line says, removing covetousness and displeasure or discontent in regard to the world. Thus, bhikshu, you should train yourself, right? Removing covetousness and displeasure. This is a short form, a synecdoche for the 5 mental hindrances, to overcome all the 5 mental hindrances. covetousness is sensual desire, displeasure is ill will. They overcome sloth and torpor, restlessness and guilt and doubt with regard to the world. The world here refers to whatever arises in your senses. That's your world. So this is how you train yourself, using body-based meditation such as the breath meditation. And then the jhana cycle repeats, okay? Section 12. When bhikshu, this samadhi has been cultivated, well cultivated by you, then bhikshu, you should cultivate this samadhi with initial application, sustained application. Now here the Buddha uses the word samadhi as an overarching term for the beginning of meditation, focus before jhana, and then jhana itself. So he uses a broad term. So this monk here finishes his Brahmavihara practice, and he goes into breath meditation, for example. Okay, and then same thing. He first does his jhana with taka, with vichara, initial application, sustained application, and then he removes them. Second jhana, third jhana, fourth jhana. Okay, and same thing. Then he goes on to watch feelings in the same way. And he builds up his jhana 1, 2, 3, 4 in the same way. And then when the feelings have subsided, he watches the remnants of his thoughts. And then he attains jhana through letting go of his thoughts. And then after that, the last satipatthana is where all those realities, for example, the 5 hindrances, impermanence, dukkha, and non-self may arise in his mind. He watches them, and then he's clear about them, he lets go of them, and he goes on to 4th jhana. So here we say Dhamma-based meditation, right? So it's based. It is not jhana off, okay? So he watches all this, lets them go, and he goes into jhana. There are no thoughts in jhana. It's pure bliss, pure clarity. And the meditation for the monk ends there, okay? So this is when you come to section 19. Okay, so the instruction ends there. We're not told whether when the monk leaves, but it's understood because the conclusion under arahathood shows that tells us the monk has succeeded. Okay, look at section 20. When the Blessed One had given him this advice, the monk rose from his seat, saluted the Blessed One, and keeping rightwise departed. So where we are told that he did depart, and he goes into retreat. Then that monk, dwelling alone, aloof, diligent, exertive, and resolute, in no long time at all, right here and now, having reached it for himself through direct knowledge, attain and dwell in the supreme goal of the holy life, for the sake of which sons of family rightly go forth from the household life into homelessness, right? So the purpose of renouncing the world, becoming a monk, is to attain awakening in this life. So this is what this monk has done. And then the monk reviews his awakening. He directly knew birth is destroyed. The holy life has been lived. Done what is to be done. There is no more of this state of being. Right, so this is an example of this is one of those what's called pericopes on attaining of arahathood. And that monk became one of the arahats. So notice here, we're not even told who this monk is. That means it can be any of us if you practice. Right, so the sutta ends there. So once again, in summary, You have different ways the monks are trained to practice, depending on the monk's personality. So we study these different suttas and we see which suits us and we follow that. Here in this case, the monk probably is a God believer. So the Buddha taught him to start with the 4 Brahmaviharas, loving kindness and so on, and use that as the basis for practicing the 4 focuses of mindfulness, satipatthana. So study the suttas and see which aspect you can connect with, which you understand and you can practice. Of course, as lay people, you don't have to aim for arahatu right away, although it's possible if you're really serious. You should at least begin with impermanence. Go on reflecting on impermanence, and that will kind of guide you along to establish that state of mind, that understanding of the Dhamma, which conduces to attaining stream winning in this life itself, of which I've often spoken about in other talks. Okay. Any questions? Any discussion?
You really see the benefits of dhyana in the society.
In terms of practice, in terms of practice. Step by step. We noticed here we have this what's called the progressive stages.
I mean the section 19. Wherever you walk with peace.
Oh yes. Yes, let me read that part. I missed that part out. So this, when you attain jhana, whether through loving kindness or through satipatthana, the benefit is called pleasant dwelling here and now. Okay, the Buddha often refers to this. When you bhikshus have thus well cultivated this samadhi, then you bhikshu, wherever you walk, you will walk with ease. Like now, this ease and comfort actually has the same sense, with joy, comfort, peace. Wherever you stand, you will stand with ease. Wherever you sit, you will sit with ease. Wherever you lie down, you will lie down with ease. Lie down here means also to sleep. These are the 4 human postures. In all the postures, you're happy. Of course, it's not mentioned if you move or you fly through the air, you're happy too, which is understood here, of course. Yeah. Now, it's not mentioned because if the monk does use sakippa and fly through the air, he has to focus on what he's doing. So here refers to the 4 common postures, right? So even if you're flying today, you're staying in a plane, technically you also adopt one of these 4 postures while in the plane. Any questions or feedback?
To do a meditation, we only do the first one. We don't do all the 4.
Oh, this monk, he's going to retreat. He's doing a deep retreat to attain arahatu, those days, because he's ready. See? We're talking about, imagine this monk, he has been listening to the Buddha, he probably has been doing group meditation, maybe has been teaching even, has been learning a lot of stuff. So now he said, okay, I want to go for retreat, All right? It's just like this scholar monk, I asked him a question, then after that he replied my question, then he put a note there, he said, after this I'll be going for a 5-day personal silent retreat, so I'll be offline, okay? So they all have their own practice, in other words. Okay?
The monks go for group retreat, but usually they'll just go alone for their retreat.
Usually alone, yeah. You get the case of Anuruddha, for example, there were 3 of them.
Yeah.
And the 5 monks, they were doing that before they met the Buddha. So you can have more than 5, more than 3 anyway. But usually one is the easiest. You can do on your own more comfortably. If more than that, then the spiritual friendship must be very strong. They must be able to know how to communicate in silence and so on. Anything else? Any other? So clear enough, huh? There are lots of teachings of this kind in this volume about practice and so on, about counseling. So it's a very useful volume if you are giving Dharma talks. And of course, here the notes are not very long, only 4 pages of notes. The way the jhanas are listed here also is quite unique. They don't list the 4 jhanas in a traditional way. It is stated in terms of removal of the dhyana factors. So that's how you compare notes. So if someone asks you, how do you know that the Buddha teaches the jhana in terms of lessening of the jhana factors, of the jhananga? And you can quote this sutta, because this sutta shows you how the jhanas are removed one by one or a set at a time. Okay, so we close here with this short reflection. We have looked at how here the Buddha's teaching on this monk practicing the 4 divine abodes as the basis for satipatthana, focuses on mindfulness. So we see different ways that meditation can be used to suit our personality and our needs, so that we can clear our minds and work towards wisdom and attain awakening in this life itself. Reflecting in this way is very good karma. By the power of such karma and by the power of the 3 jewels, may we be blessed with good health, a clear mind, and be wise and courageous enough to aspire to stream winning, at least in this life itself. And by the power of the 3 jewels too, may all our loved ones, all our relatives and friends be well and happy. And those who are practicing the right way to see and enjoy the fruit of the path in this life itself. And by the same token, may those who are lost, who have difficulties with the teaching, to clear up their minds and see the true teaching in this life itself. May all beings be well and happy. Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu.